It's written in the YouTube terms of service that if you're starting a Song of Ice and Fire based YouTube channel, you have to make at least one video on the mystery of the catspaw. If you haven't already spent 1,000 hours watching videos discussing it, here's a quick refresher. In A Game of Thrones, while King Robert is visiting Winterfell with his entourage, Bran Stark gets pushed out of a tower for incest cover-up reasons and falls into a coma. After King Robert's party departs, an unknown man stays behind concealed in the Winterfell stables, and after lighting a fire as a distraction, attempts to kill the unconscious Bran Stark with a distinctive Valyrian steel dagger. The attempt is foiled by the presence of Bran's mother Catelyn, who struggles with him long enough for Bran's direwolf Summer to intervene, killing the man, and afterwards a large sum of money is found in the stables, which, along with the high quality of his weapon, suggests the man was paid and equipped by some unknown party to kill Bran, hence the name the catspaw. It is no surprise that the mystery of who was behind this assassination attempt has been so compelling to readers of the series. This incident has massive repercussions on the political situation in Westeros. It is also a clear, deliberate mystery, presumably with a direct answer that was already known to the author when it was written. George R. R. Martin has said that readers could probably work it out with the information already in the published books. There's a limited pool of suspects appropriate for it to be a satisfying answer, and that number is also greatly further reduced by the logistical demands for any potential villain to be in range of Winterfell to act. Someone at Winterfell paid for Bran Stark to be killed. It's a whodunit. Therefore, everyone, including some characters in universe and probably including you watching this video now, has at some point had a go at solving it. I'm making this video because I personally have never been satisfied by any of the candidates I've seen put forward, either from Tyrion and Jaime in universe, who both conclude it was Joffrey for somewhat tenuous reasons, or from those theory videos I have seen. That's not to say I don't think those are good theories. I especially like the suggestion it was King Robert. However, I personally have never been convinced. I'm making this video to set out why I think I know who did it. There's one scene really in Catelyn's 4th POV chapter that I believe explains everything, and without this theory really is sort of incomprehensible. With a series of questions, I'll show you how I came to the conclusion I did, and maybe you'll be convinced too. Question 1. Why did Littlefinger lie? After the attempt on Bran's life, Catelyn Stark travels to King's Landing ahead of the King's party to inform her husband Ned when he arrives with them. Despite attempting to travel incognito, she is met there by two key figures in the court, Lord Littlefinger and Lord Varys. When she produces the knife, Littlefinger recognizes it. Like he says, it's his. However, he claims he lost it to Tyrion Lannister in a bet on Jaime Lannister in a tourney. This is a lie. We later learn that Tyrion never bets against his family. Littlefinger in fact lost the dagger to King Robert, so why did he lie? This scene with the meeting has always been strangely fascinating to me. I think it's an incredibly important scene. You kind of get the sense of a second conversation taking place between Littlefinger and Varys just over Catelyn's head, and all the dialogue is laden with double meaning. At the centre of it is this lie from Littlefinger, which goes on to cause a whole lot of strife between the Starks and the Lannisters, and arguably because of Catelyn's later imprisonment of Tyrion on these grounds, it could be said to have started the whole War of the Five Kings. There's actually quite a simple answer to the question of why he lies. This meeting, supposedly on Catelyn's behalf, is actually for Littlefinger. It's an ambush. This meeting initially appears to be Littlefinger's initiative. However, we find out that he's received the information that Catelyn is in the city from Varys. It's a setup. Lord Baelish tells me that I have you to thank for bringing me here. Oh yes, I suppose I am guilty. I hope you forgive me, kind lady. He eased himself down into a seat and put his hands together. I wonder if we might trouble you to show us the dagger. To Littlefinger, Varys has claimed he doesn't know why Catelyn is here. Lord Varys knows everything except why you are here, and Varys hasn't told him about the knife. Littlefinger was lost. I feel rather like the knight who arrives at the battle without his lance. What dagger are we talking about? Who is Sir Roderick? Varys is deliberately putting him in front of Catelyn without his knowledge to react to his dagger that was used to kill her son in order to provoke him into a lie. Both are trying to gain favour and appear trustworthy and useful allies to the new power of the Starks. The dagger is like a bomb and Varys is dropping in Littlefinger's lap. Varys is hoping he'll do the natural thing and pretend not to know the dagger. Catelyn unwittingly helps threaten Littlefinger when she shows the dagger for the first time. Here, perhaps your little birds will whisper the name of the man it belongs to. Though it's his dagger, Peter doesn't immediately say anything. He's previously reasoned out that Catelyn was in King's Landing because she's in trouble. Family, duty, honour, he echoed, all of which require you to remain in Winterfell, where our hand left you. No, my lady, something has happened. This sudden trip of yours bespeaks a certain urgency. I beg of you, let me help. Now he's looking at his dagger. Catelyn is obviously wounded and wants to know urgently who the dagger belongs to. Clearly, this is not a dagger he wants to be associated with. However, he's also able to sense a trap. Varys brought him here. Perhaps Varys wants him to lie. Littlefinger is silent for at least a few seconds while Varys picks up the blade and pricks his finger with it. So Littlefinger only has these few seconds to choose how to react and only has bad options. He can lie, pretend not to know the dagger at all, and then Varys can later reveal it is his dagger and put a massive wedge of distrust between him and the Starks. Or he can tell the truth, that it belongs to the king but used to be his, and risk the ire of both the Starks and the volatile king for spreading distrust and rumours between them. And given he has no idea what the dagger was used for yet, he has no idea what he'll be implicating the king in, but it probably wouldn't be anything good. Don't forget that Catelyn later arrests Tyrion on his word, so claiming it was the king's would have been an explosive accusation. Finally, he chooses to split down the middle, the least bad option. He can half lie, admit to knowing the dagger, but claim it belongs to someone else other than the king. He looks honest on his part, but protects the king. If he gets caught in a lie, he can claim the best of motivations, but who to shift the blame onto with just a few seconds' notice? Tyrion is a simple choice for one reason: he's the furthest away. While the rest of the court is due to return to King's Landing imminently, Tyrion is still at the wall at this point, pretty much as far away as it is possible for a person to be. He's buying himself the most possible time to change the situation back in his favour after being caught on the back foot by Varys. Once Littlefinger decides his course of action, he acts with forced casualness and makes his performative confession. However, in an attempt to intimidate Varys as a reply to his play, he throws the knife across the room into the door. When Littlefinger makes his claim that it belongs to Tyrion, Varys is deliberately called out as looking at Catelyn's face while Littlefinger is speaking. He is more interested in her reaction, simply because he already knows who the dagger belongs to. And as if in confirmation of this interpretation of events, Littlefinger later tries to backtrack, telling Ned that the dagger is useless as evidence against the Lannisters and that he should dispose of it. So this makes sense of Littlefinger's actions in this scene. However, this raises more questions. If Littlefinger's actions make sense with this explanation, it requires Varys to have orchestrated this meeting intentionally to catch Littlefinger out. This means he must know a few facts: that Catelyn is here to inquire about the dagger, that the dagger was used to try and kill her son, and that the dagger used to belong to Littlefinger and now belongs to King Robert, which raises the second question. Question 2. What does Varys know about the dagger and how? At minimum, Varys already knows a shocking amount by this point. In fact, Catelyn thinks an impossible amount. Let's look at it. He knows at least that Catelyn and Sir Roderick have arrived in King's Landing, where they are staying, that Sir Roderick has gone to the Red Keep to speak with Sir Aaron Santagar, and that they are looking to find the owner of a particular Valyrian steel dagger. Catelyn Stark stared at the eunuch in stunned disbelief. He was a spider, she thought wildly, an enchanter, or worse. He knew things no one could possibly know. She later confirms this to Ned in his 4th POV chapter. Varys has ways of learning things that no man could know. He has some dark art, Ned, I swear it. What are we supposed to make of this? We have a point of view claiming Varys has impossible knowledge. As readers, are we supposed to conclude that Catelyn's judgment is deficient, Varys is really just that good at being a spy, or that Varys really does have some supernatural power? Even accounting for Varys being in the walls and having little kids running around as spies for him, amongst other informers, acquiring Catelyn and Sir Roderick out of all the travellers arriving in the city on any given day, and following them closely enough to get all the details of their mission is an incredible feat of coordination and communication from Varys with zero foreknowledge of their arrival. Here's what Varys has to say about what happened that afternoon. Sir Roderick did call here earlier this afternoon. He visited with Sir Aaron Santagar in the armoury, and they talked of a certain dagger. About sunset, they left the castle together and walked to that dreadful hovel where you were staying. They are still there, drinking in the common room, waiting for your return. Sir Roderick was very distressed to find you gone. So he had to be in command of the information soon enough to realise the importance of their arrival, to get someone to learn where they are staying, and to get himself or someone else to listen in on Sir Roderick's conversation with Sir Aaron in the artery, then having overheard Sir Roderick talking with Sir Aaron, or had the conversation related to him, realise the implications of this conversation, find Littlefinger and arrange the meeting with him, and then for Littlefinger to send out his gold cloaks to fetch Catelyn and to return her to the Red Keep, all before Sir Roderick leaves the Red Keep with Sir Aaron Santagar, for them to then return to the inn together and not find Catelyn. And he has to do all this with zero foreknowledge of what will occur that day, meaning he has to know and be able to do this specifically for just 2 out of hundreds of arrivals to the city, staying in one of hundreds of inns, and then for one conversation in the thousands happening at any one time in the Red Keep. It's no wonder Catelyn thinks this is impossible. I claimed in the title of this video that the person who sent the catspaw made one mistake. Varys is using a simple trick to make his powers of espionage appear more potent than they actually are. Recall his other lines about power being a shadow cast on a wall, and about the necessity for him to regularly prove his usefulness to the other players at court. This line, his very first in the entire series in fact, accidentally reveals how he does it. The man who stepped through the door was plump, perfumed, powdered, and as hairless as an egg. He wore a vest of woven gold thread over a loose gown of purple silk, and on his feet wore pointed slippers of soft velvet. "Lady Stark," he said, taking her hand in both of his, "to see you again after so many years is such a joy." His flesh was soft and moist, and his breath smelled of lilacs. "Oh, your poor hands! Have you burned yourself, sweet lady? The fingers are so delicate. Our good Maester Pycelle makes a marvellous salve. Shall I send for a jar?" Varys sees Catelyn's bandaged hands and assumes she has burnt herself. If this was real life, there might be dozens of reasons Varys jumps to this explanation totally coincidentally. However, this is fiction. Every word has been deliberately included by the author in order to communicate something to us, either about the plot, the characters, or the wider world. Here, he's showing us Varys making a mistake. He's accidentally revealing he knows more than he should. Varys presumes she has burnt her hands fighting the Winterfell library fire. Catelyn was supposed to be away fighting the Winterfell library fire while Bran was killed. There's only one way Varys would know there was a fire, but not that Catelyn never went to help fight it. He was the one who planned Bran's murder. Now Catelyn appearing in King's Landing asking about the knife with burnt hands seems to confirm things went exactly to plan. Now the impossible feat of intelligence is suddenly much more plausible. He is able to track and cover Sir Roderick and Catelyn so effectively because he was already expecting them to come. All he had to do was prime a man at the dock to look for and follow a couple of specific people whose approximate time frame of arrival he already knows. Perhaps even less, simply to ask Sir Aaron Centaur to tell him if someone comes asking after that particular knife. It certainly sounds like Sir Aaron and Sir Roderick didn't spend the entire afternoon talking in the account Varys gives, but they don't leave until the evening. What is Centaur doing in the gap? Perhaps he has Sir Roderick wait for him while he reports to Varys that someone has turned up asking about the knife. Suddenly, this spying requires almost no effort on Varys' part whatsoever, but he is able to appear like an omniscient spider. Littlefinger makes a quip alluding to this very technique of Lord Varys's in the scene itself. Oftentimes he knows about it before it happens. In a scene where Catelyn is investigating the attempt on Bran's life, what could that mean? Immediately after seeing Catelyn's burnt hands, confirmation his plan succeeded, Varys steers the topic of conversation on to Bran. Varys bobbed his head. "I was grievous sad to hear about your son, and him so young. The gods are cruel." "On that we agree, Lord Varys," she said. "The title was but a courtesy due to him as a council member. Varys was lord of nothing but the spiderweb, and master of none but his whisperers." And as it strays away from Bran onto King Robert, he steers it back again. "Good lady," Varys said with great solicitude, "there are men in the free cities with wondrous healing powers. Say only the word, and I will send for one for your dear Bran." With this prominent display of believing Bran is still alive, merely in a coma, Varys is showing he's innocent, but prompting Catelyn to contradict him and tell them that Bran is now beyond all healing, thus bringing the conversation naturally on to the knife, the murder, and setting up Littlefinger to lie and prove himself untrustworthy to the Starks, or to tell the truth and get himself in trouble with the king. It's only now Varys realizes his scheme has not succeeded in killing Bran when Catelyn refers to him in the present tense. Maester Luwin is doing all that can be done for Bran, and once again after this, Varys is forced to take hold of the conversation and steer it back in the direction he wants. "I wonder if we might trouble you to show us the dagger." Now the choice of the knife doesn't look random or coincidental at all. Varys was able to choose the dagger ahead of time, and chose the one he did specifically to drive a wedge between three of his enemies, the Starks, the King, and Littlefinger. We also see a second purpose for the meeting set up. Varys wants to convey this information to the Starks, but doesn't want to show how much he knows himself about the dagger, so he deliberately puts Littlefinger in the room to either lie and implicate himself, or tell the truth and convey that information for him. So Littlefinger lies, as he does, to escape the trap set up by Varys. Varys is able to set up the trap because he has advanced knowledge about the dagger and knows how it will look for Littlefinger. He knows this about the dagger because he chose it deliberately for this reason when he was setting up the plan to kill Bran Stark. That leads us on to the third question. Question 3. How was Varys able to send the catspaw? You may recall earlier that I mentioned that the pool of suspects was limited to those inside Winterfell. This was a little bit of a misdirection on my part. I personally have found none of the suspects inside Winterfell convincing, but only someone inside Winterfell or relatively nearby would have time to react in order to arrange the murder in the interval between Bran's fall and the departure of the King's party, just about 2 weeks. Even using ravens, someone in the King's Landing would be pushing it to arrange the killing in that time, and that wouldn't account for the knife or the money, which couldn't be sent by raven. So someone at or near Winterfell had to arrange the deed, but none of the known suspects are convincing. If we're going to suggest another character we already know was at Winterfell in this time, without our knowledge, isn't the Master of Disguise a pretty prime candidate? So Varys was at Winterfell in disguise. First of all, we've had Varys' skills at disguise very clearly set up. Characters only clock him after an interval of close-up interaction, and without his POV, we necessarily only see the times he does get spotted. He was able to keep the job as Rugen the Jailer for years without anyone noticing, and he already disguised himself once as a soldier in Arya's third POV chapter when she sees him in the tunnels. At a distance, in Robert's entourage, he won't have any trouble disguising himself as an anonymous freerider. If the catspaw does get caught and questioned, all he can reveal is that he worked for some unknown freerider or other hanger-on. This is a much neater scheme than any other suspect who would presumably have exposed themselves in the act of hiring the catspaw if he is later caught and interrogated. We know as well the royal party was travelling extremely slowly. It was easy for Catelyn to beat them back down via sea from White Harbour, even after the King's party had several days' head start. It would be no problem for Varys to delay his departure until well after the King, make himself visible in King's Landing at this time, then don his disguise, catch a ship north from King's Landing, and rejoin the royal party somewhere further up the road, perhaps via White Harbour. On the return, he could do the same thing in the opposite direction, making his absence from King's Landing much shorter than the King's and less noticeable to anyone else there. Varys is a deliberately slippery character who comes and goes seemingly of his own accord. He's holding down at least one secret job. If anyone could get away with this kind of trip, it's him. We also had it deliberately established that it can be done. Mance tells us how easy it was, in fact, to slip into King Robert's entourage and infiltrate the feast in disguise. And hey, what do you know, a secret meeting with Varys the Spider makes a much neater explanation for Mance's visit to Winterfell than his dubious claim of just wanting to see King Robert, but that's speculation for another time. So what speculative meeting with Mance aside does Varys have as a motivation for making this trip? Pretty simply to keep up on events at the royal court and to continue being able to manipulate things from the shadows, specifically to prevent the government from falling apart just yet. This actually makes a certain degree of practical sense. The medieval court isn't like a modern state apparatus where if the government head goes off on a visit, there's a professional bureaucracy that keeps on doing business in his absence. Government is usually done on an ad hoc basis by the court which surrounds the king. Effectively, wherever the king goes is the seat of government. In real medieval history, this is called itinerant kingship or itinerant government. For Varys specifically, he would want to keep an eye on Robert, on the Lannister twins and their secret, and Ned Stark's interactions with all of them. Will he accept or refuse the position of hand? Will the Lannisters accidentally reveal their secret? When he's overheard in Arya's third POV chapter, he says Lord Stark, out of all of them, is the one who troubles his sleep. It's only natural he wants to be on the scene for these major events. By the nature of geography, a journey up and down the narrow sea will also take him in range of Pentos in both directions. We know that he must have irregular conferences with Illyrio, like the one we see in the tunnels in Arya's third POV chapter. It would be unreasonable to assume that it's always Illyrio who comes to him. A ship crisscrossing up the narrow sea would be a fine opportunity to confer with Illyrio in Pentos on his way north or on the way back. Now, if we go back to that first conversation between Catelyn and Varys, we see double meanings at play once again. Lady Stark, he said, taking her hand in both of his, to see you again after so many years is such a joy. Varys is subtly mocking Catelyn here. She thinks it has been many years, but in fact it has been just a few weeks, and she doesn't have a clue. But wait, you might be saying, don't we know Varys is in King's Landing because the king is getting messages from him? Question 3a. What about the rider from Varys? Yes, this is true. The King's party does receive a message seemingly from Varys in King's Landing in Eddard's second POV chapter that would perhaps appear to contradict this theory. There was a rider in the night from Lord Varys in King's Landing, here. Robert explicitly says this is from Varys in King's Landing. This shows us how the message is working as misdirection, specifically for Varys' current location. If we look into the specifics of the message, however, it's actually just further circumstantial evidence that Varys is much closer than they believe. Daenerys Targaryen has wed some Dothraki horseword. What of it? Should we send her a wedding gift? This is the one piece of information that doesn't actually prove Varys' location. He is in close collaboration with Illyrio, the man organising the wedding. He'd have noticed a long time in advance that this was planned to go ahead. Again, Varys is using the same trick, revealing information about events he is at least partially the protagonist of to make it look like something his spies have uncovered. This rider, who we never see on page, is probably Varys himself. Having travelled with them thus far, all Varys has to do is present himself at the King's tent, claiming to have arrived from King's Landing, thus providing the impression that he is far away in King's Landing right now, actively completing spy work. This scene takes place in the Barrowlands. Looking at the map of the north, we can see this is the last possible stop where someone wishing to leave the party and continue on by sea could depart. Now Varys, in disguise as the rider, can leave again after delivering his message, to depart by sea and return to King's Landing before the rest of the party does, leaving only a very short period where he's incommunicado in between. Question 4. Why would Varys want to kill Bran? This is actually a clever little bit of misdirection from George R.R. Martin. At first we suspect the Lannister twins for the murder attempt, obviously wanting to silence Bran for what he has seen. However, once they are ruled out as suspects, we seemingly rule out that motivation too. We're left looking at other rather contrived motives for attempted murder, like Tyrion's supposition about Joffrey wanting to impress his father. None of them are really convincing. However, now we know it was Varys, we can see that the motive was in fact exactly what we first suspected. Being in Winterfell, Varys discovered, perhaps through spies, perhaps as a direct witness, why and by who Bran was pushed from the tower. If Bran wakes up, he will reveal the Lannister secret. Varys at this point is perhaps the only other character who desires to keep the secret of the Lannister incest as much as the Lannisters themselves. At this stage, Varys is attempting to keep the plates spinning. He and Illyrio want the plates to come crashing down at the exact right moment to allow them an opportunity for a Targaryen restoration. Neither young Griff or Viserys and Daenerys are ready. Here's Illyrio talking to Varys in Arya's third POV chapter. Too soon, the voice with the accent complained. What good is war now? We are not ready. Delay. If Bran wakes up and reveals the Lannister secret, it will put Baratheon and Stark at war with Lannisters. Lannisters, without obvious allies and against the crown, will be easily defeated. Robert will be remarried perhaps to Marjorie at Littlefinger's arrangement, and they can further bind the Tyrells to the regime with Jaime Lannister's vacated place on the Kingsguard. The main Dornish grievance with Robert's regime will also be exercised if Robert presents them with Tywin Lannister's head. All those Lannister debts can be wiped out by royal decree as part of the peace terms. Robert's regime will be in much stabler hands and the main houses will be brought back into the fold, none of them likely to rise on behalf of a Targaryen pretender. This is a nightmare scenario for Varys. Like Illyrio says, it's too soon. The last thing he wants is for Lord Stark to come in and fix the rot in Robert's regime now, so he has to clean up the Lannisters' mess, and to do so in a way that places any blame not onto the Lannisters, but puts a wedge directly down the middle of Littlefinger, the King, and the Starks. This motivation is made quite clear in another quote that initially acts as another piece of misdirection. The fools tried to kill his son, and what's worse, they made a mummer's farce of it. He's not a man to put that aside, I warn you. The wolf and the lion will soon be at each other's throats, whether we will it or no. On first reading, this plays into the reader's suspicions of the Lannisters being behind the catspaw. However, we later learn it wasn't them. So what is Varys talking about here? What does he know? Does he mistakenly believe it was the Lannisters who ordered the catspaw like the readers will at this point? Perhaps, however, if he's innocent and he wasn't in Winterfell, how does he know that Bran's first fall was not an accident? Only the fact that we know what Bran saw implicates the Lannisters in the second attempt on his life, because we know the secret they would want to conceal. In order to believe this explanation, we'd have to believe that Varys is somehow able to learn of the real reason for Bran's fall, but not that the Lannisters weren't responsible for the second attempt on his life. So we'd have to have spies watching them closely enough to catch their rendezvous in the tower at Winterfell, but then those spies also coincidentally miss that at no point did the Lannisters have any contact with the catspaw. Or does he suspect some other group of fools for the second attempt on Bran's life? If so, who? There doesn't seem to be another group that Varys could plausibly suspect of conspiring to kill Bran if he or the Lannisters aren't involved. All the other explanations tend to fall on single individuals such as Joffrey, Mance, King Robert, all with personal and not political reasons for trying to kill Bran. And if he does suspect another unknown group of fools for the second attempt, why will that cause specifically the wolf and the lion to be at each other's throats? No, it's pretty clear he's talking about the Lannisters here. There's a simpler explanation. Varys already knows it was the Lannisters who pushed Bran out of the tower, their attempt to kill Ned Stark's son, because he was there at Winterfell, specifically guarding their secret. He's not talking about the catspaw, but the first attempt to kill Bran by pushing him out of the tower, with his second attempt being just part of the mummer's farce that follows. Varys sees himself as cleaning up the Lannisters' mess with his own second attempt. If he glosses over that his attempt also failed, that's only natural in character, and serves to keep the mystery concealed. It's simple misdirection on George R. R. Martin's part, a technique he employs often. Conclusion. We now have all the pieces necessary to solve the whodunit. Varys travelled north in common disguise and fell in with the royal party somewhere before Winterfell, much like Mance did in the opposite direction. Once inside, he was able to monitor events as desired and, like Tyrion, suspected Bran had fallen from the tower as he was pushed to conceal a rendezvous between the Lannister twins. In line with his desire to keep the relationship a secret, he arranged for the catspaw to kill Bran after they had left Winterfell, selecting a knife that would cast suspicion between his three main enemies if it was discovered. In the Barrowlands, he appears purporting to bring a message from himself in King's Landing to cover up his absence from there, and then perhaps carrying a return message, departs the royal party and heads for White Harbour to catch a ship back to King's Landing. He arrives before the royal party and appears to never have left. Knowing the reaction Bran's death will cause, he advises Sir Aaron Centaur or another informant to tell him immediately if anyone comes investigating the knife. When Catelyn appears looking for the knife, he is able to set up Littlefinger, who is as of yet unaware of the situation, by trying to provoke him into lying in front of Catelyn about the knife used to attempt to murder her son. So, what do you think? Are you convinced? This theory requires somewhat complicated logistics, but none that involve elements that we haven't already had established, and nothing more than what Mance has already told us he was able to do. It requires a character in disguise, yes, but that is the main character who has been explicitly shown to us using disguises before in the past. And it doesn't require Varys to act in any way counter to the motivations he has already explicitly stated. I like this theory because it clears up a lot of loose ends, and once you have it in mind, you can see the double meanings, the dramatic irony, and the misdirection George R. R. Martin is using to conceal it, adding a new layer to a lot of different lines of dialogue. Remember that quote from earlier when Catelyn first meets Varys after arriving in King's Landing to investigate the attempt on Bran's life? Lord Baelish tells me that I have you to thank for bringing me here. Oh yes, I suppose I am guilty. I hope you forgive me, kind lady. Yes, again we have a cheeky double meaning. Here's George R. R. Martin's dramatic irony again. Here's Varys confess right in front of us.